was for the culture of Aryans, the most ancient monument in the history of world literature, as you well know, are the Vedas. Vedas are texts, lyric texts, poetic texts, partly religious texts. However, the term religious is not well applicable here, because Vedas are pretty early exponents. These texts were brought by Aryans to the Hindustan peninsula, or they already had them there. The dating of Vedas is actually a very vague question. I consider them to be written down about 3 to 3,500 years ago, and that's the most modest estimation of dating Vedas. Hindu Brahmins consider them to be 10,000 years old, so this is a really skeptic estimation. Brahmins have their own methods of counting the datings, and they have very good reasons for these numbers. We also have scientific datings, which lead us back 4 to 5,000 years from now. In any case, we cannot state the exact datings of Vedas, because the Aryan culture was the nomadic culture. So it left a very few memorial monuments for us to catch, or they are not found yet. And on the other side, to figure out the dating of the text, we have to compare the datings with those texts which were written earlier. But nothing was earlier than Vedas. We also cannot find some first writings of Vedas, because from time immemorial Vedas were transmitted orally. They were learned by heart and transmitted from the teacher to the apprentice. They were memorized using very complex mnemonic methods, word by word. And Vedas were written down comparatively recently, about 2 and 2,500 years ago. Moreover, in Manu Smriti, the laws of Manu, there existed a line which cursed the people who tried to write down Vedas. By that time, writing already existed, but it was considered to be unacceptable to write down Vedas. In fact, it was the whole revolution in the Indian culture to write these sacred texts down when the writing already existed for a long time, because in this way they were slightly desacralized. From one side, it's interesting from cultural perspective that people transmitted a huge amount of text orally. Just the Rig Veda consists of 3 huge volumes, and there is about the same volume of Atharva Veda, Yajur Veda and Sama Veda. So in fact it's huge amount of text which was memorized exactly and precisely. Each letter, its spelling and pronunciation were memorized and brought to us through thousands of years in the way that the all writings of Vedas are identical now. Somewhere I read that there are 2 lists of Vedas, the Northern and the Southern one, and they differ only in one single letter. Well, I haven't compared them myself, so I cannot guarantee and verify this information. Nevertheless, the phenomenon is quite interesting. But in perspective of dating Vedas, it constitutes huge difficulties. It becomes truly impossible to understand their real age. Here we see the written Rig Veda using the Devanagari script. This is probably a quite recent text, about several hundred years old. But this way or the other, Vedas had reached us, and they are the oldest cultural monument in the history of humanity. And besides, there is a question: do Vedas mention yoga? Vedas do not have the direct mentioning of term yoga in the context of our practice. The term yoga is used in Vedas, but it is used in slightly different context. It is used in the meaning of conjunction, because root yuj is to join, to connect, and yoga means harness, the joint. However, in 10th mandala of Rig Veda, there exist several hymns which transmit very exactly and very precisely the meaning of our yoga practice. One of these hymns is the Keshin hymn, the hymn to the long-haired one. In fact, Kesha means hair. If you have been to India, you've probably been to the city of Rishikesh, the city where the rishis wash their hair. In fact, the Russian word kasa, which stands for the long hair, is derived from the Sanskrit kesh. So Keshin is the long-haired one. Even now you have probably noticed that sadhus don't cut their hair, and that distinguished them from the parigrahins, the householders who in Vedic period shaved their heads. They left on a small amount of hair, which was okay to take through the ring which they carried on the thumb. And when the person abandoned his worldly business and started practicing spiritual practices, he stopped shaving his head. That's why the people who had left their worldly businesses were called Keshins. I'll read a part of this hymn. The long-haired one endures fire. The long-haired one endures poison. The long-haired one endures both worlds. The long-haired one is said to gaze full of heaven. The long-haired one is said to be that light. The wind-girt sages have donned the yellow robe of dust. Along the wind's course they glide when the gods have penetrated them. Exulting in our seahood, upon the winds we have ascended. Of us, you mortals, only our bodies do you behold. Through the middle region flies the sage shining down upon all forms. For this piety is he deemed to be the friend of every god. If we would take a closer look at these poetical metaphors, we would notice that lots of features of yoga are already in here. To start with, let's consider that Kashin endures both worlds. We may state that for any usual person, especially in antiquity, the world is dualistic. There exist the right and the wrong, the good and the evil. But for the purpose of true spiritual development, one must get rid of these dualities. In the latter yoga, there appeared the category of Advaita, the non-duality. And Yoga Sutra mentions that the deeds are either good or bad for the humans, either dark or light, and they are neither black nor white for the yogi. So, for the purpose of viewing anything in larger perspective, observing anything in meta-context, one must get rid of these dualities and see both sides of the same coin. And it's metaphorically mentioned here. The long-haired one, the Kashin, endures both worlds. He coincided all the opposites within himself. This theme of coinciding the opposites was discussed in the later period, for example by Sri Aurobindo, who said that the higher the branches of the tree go upwards to the light, the deeper its roots must go down to the dark. So this is a very widespread and significant yogi archetype. And further in the hymn, of us, you mortals, only our bodies do you behold. And here we see the distant connotations to the shamanic practices, to the idea of the shamanic journey which shaman performs in some state of trance. Through the middle region flies the sage shining down upon all forms. Surely we won't consider some naive materialistic interpretation of this as if he flew across the sky like a Batman. But how could this be interpreted otherwise? I would say that this is the metaphor of ability of seeing the situation from above, from the meta-context, in some more global aspect and a larger perspective. And next line is, for his piety is he deemed the friend of every god. Note that in the original text, which is given here on the slide, it's written this way, Mitram, the friend. So note that he doesn't worship gods, he makes friends with them. And with which gods? With all the gods. So there is a feeling of tolerance, the conjunction to every culture, the linkage to every tradition, the ability to enter everywhere is among the global values of yoga. Without both oceans he dwells, the upper and the lower. Here is the feeling oneself, being the citizen of the world. And note that it's now easy to be the citizen of the world when you can fly anywhere by plane. While in the antiquity, when everyone was linked to his village, to his social surrounding, it was a huge spiritual exploit. And here in the first line, the word Vishwa is used, the universe, the wholeness. So, although this hymn is very metaphorical, within itself it contains lots of values of yoga which had reached our days. This is not the only hymn which connotates to yoga. About the other ones, I will tell you a little bit later.